Before we begin, please hit that like button, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for being part of the story. It was a Friday night. After finishing work that evening, a few of my work friends and I decided to go out drinking together at a local bar nearby. There were 4 of us in total, and each of us rode our own motorcycle to get there. After spending the night drinking and having a good time, we left the bar and got on our motorcycles to head home. However, just moments after turning the corner away from the bar, we ran into a police checkpoint. As expected, all 4 of us had blood alcohol levels exceeding the legal limit, so we were immediately arrested. There was no room for excuses. The police officers took us to the station to document the incident and detain us overnight until we could be taken to court the next morning. At that moment, all we could do was regret getting caught for drunk driving. While we were waiting for our records to be processed, a police officer approached us and bluntly suggested,
"Look, just pay the bail and go home. You can meet us at court in the morning."
I figured the officer might have been overwhelmed with work and didn't want to bother keeping an eye on a bunch of drunken detainees. Regardless, we considered his suggestion. But after discussing it among ourselves, we realized it was already around 2 a.m., just a few hours before our scheduled court appearance. Finding bail money at that hour would be nearly impossible, so we decided to spend the night in the holding cell and go to court in the morning. Once our records were processed, the officers led us to the detention area. The officer who had suggested we pay bail and going home was no longer around. He had likely gone out for patrol duty. Still feeling the effects of the alcohol and exhausted from the situation, I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. I didn't check whether there were other detainees in the holding cells. I simply kept my head down and walked inside the cell with my friends. We sat down and started chatting among ourselves to pass the time. Not long after, I suddenly heard someone coughing from the opposite cell. When I turned toward the source of the noise, I saw a shadowy figure sitting on the concrete block that served as a toilet. Looking more closely, I realized it was a man, an overweight man, to be exact, who was in the middle of doing his business. Thinking he was just another detainee, the 4 of us didn't pay much attention and continued talking about how we would handle our situation in court the next morning, how we would explain ourselves to the judge, and what to expect in court. About 30 minutes passed. Then, out of nowhere, a loud bang echoed through the cell. It sounded like someone slamming their fists against the bars. It was deafening. We turned toward the noise and saw that it was the same overweight man. He now stood at the front of his cell, gripping the bars with both hands. His clothes were ragged, his hair disheveled. Then he spoke.
"Drunk, huh?"
My friends and I exchanged glances but didn't respond. Something about him felt off, and we had no interest in engaging. For all we knew, he had been charged with something far worse than us. Best to keep our distance. So, we acted as if we hadn't heard him, but he wasn't going to let it go. He knocked on the bars again, this time more forcefully.
"Are you drunk?"
His voice was louder now, demanding an answer. The man kept repeating his words, louder and louder.
"Drunk, huh? Are you drunk? You've been drinking."
Each time, his voice grew more aggressive. By the 4th or 5th time, it had escalated to a near shout, echoing throughout the detention area.
"Drunk, huh? Are you drunk? You've been drinking."
Finally, one of my friends, clearly irritated, snapped,
"Yeah, we're drunk. We're going to court in the morning."
The response was meant to shut him up, hoping he would lose interest and leave us alone. We went back to our conversation, deliberately ignoring him as much as possible, but I kept an eye on him. He was pacing now, back and forth in his cell. His movements were erratic. He would stop for a moment, then suddenly start moving again. The flickering shadows on the walls made the whole scene feel even more unsettling. After a while, the man walked toward a corner of his holding area, where a section of the concrete walls blocked the view. Then he disappeared into that corner, out of sight. Not long after, we heard something loud again. It sounded like someone was banging on the cell wall. Then the noise stopped. We continued talking, discussing what we would say in court, but just as we started to settle, another sound emerged from the opposite cell. It was different this time, something scraping, dragging along the floor. Then it stopped again. At that moment, all four of us froze, our eyes locked on the opposite holding cell, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. And then, right at that moment, we were utterly horrified. A hand, pale, lifeless, crept out from the darkness, its fingers curling around the bars of the cell. It gripped tightly, as if trying to drag itself forward. The moment it moved, my stomach dropped. It was him, the grotesquely overweight man, his face covered in blood. His mouth, his entire jaw, was torn apart, his lower jaw dangling loosely, barely connected to the rest of his face. We screamed in sheer terror, our voices echoing through the entire holding cell. But strangely, the officers outside seemed oblivious to our screams. They didn't come running to check on us. It was as if they hadn't heard a thing. That's when I realized. A glass panel separated the holding area from the officers' station, muting our screams. But I don't know what they saw. Maybe something on the surveillance cameras, because moments later, they stormed into the room.
Hey, keep it down. What's going on here?
One of them yelled. But by then, we were in full-blown hysteria. We tried to explain, but our words were incoherent. One of our friends even broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. We begged them to let us out of the holding cell. "Please, let us out," we pleaded, gripping onto their uniforms. "We'll sit anywhere, outside the cell, on the floor, just not in here." The officers exchanged glances. No questions, no hesitation. Maybe they already knew. Maybe they had seen it before. Without another word, they let us out. As we were being let out, I glanced back at the opposite holding cell, only to find it completely empty. The man, the grotesque, bloodied figure with the torn-apart jaw, was nowhere to be seen. They took us to the interrogation room, trying to calm us down. A doctor was called in to check on us. The officers asked what had happened, their voices steady, like they were just doing their job. But the way they spoke, they weren't really asking, and none of them seemed willing to explain anything. It was as if they were deliberately avoiding the incident. Time passed, and before I knew it, it was around 5 a.m. The same police officer who had told us earlier to get bail money and go home just returned. He had been out on patrol and was surprised to see all four of us still sitting outside. Shaking his head, he said,
"See? I told you to bail yourselves out, but you didn't listen."
Yet, even then he didn't elaborate what he meant, which left me deeply unsettled. What on earth had we encountered? Everyone around us acted as if this was normal. Morning arrived. At around 7 a.m., a prisoner transport vehicle pulled up to take me, my friends, and the other DUI detainees to the court processing center. As we waited for the rest of the detainees to be processed, the driver, a middle-aged man with a knowing look, walked over to us and asked,
"So you guys saw it, huh?"
Still shaken, we recounted our terrifying experience from the night before. The driver let out a heavy sigh, as if confirming something he already knew.
"What you saw? That was nothing."
Confused and desperate for answers, we pressed him to explain. That's when he told us the story. 2 or 3 months ago, a man was arrested on drug charges. They found illegal amounts of methamphetamine pills on him. He was in total despair, knowing he'd be facing a long, brutal prison sentence. So one night, he tried to take the easy way out. He tried to hang himself inside that very same cell. But the problem was, he was a big guy, way too heavy. He tore his pants apart to make a noose, but the noose he made wasn't strong enough, or rather the man was too heavy. Instead of strangling him, it slipped from his neck and lodged itself in his mouth. The force of his own weight caused his upper and lower jaws to snap apart completely. He bled out and died. The station held 2 separate rituals and ceremonies for his soul. But it didn't work. He's still here. People say his soul can't leave because he was convicted of a major crime, so he's bound to this place, eternally imprisoned.
Some detainees have had it worse than you guys. There was one guy who ended up in the same cell where the heavy guy died. He couldn't even last a few hours. He was so terrified that he begged to be moved immediately. The officers here? They won't even sit at the monitoring desk in front of that cell anymore. No one wants to be stationed there. They've seen him too many times. That's why that desk is always empty now.
Hearing this, we were left in stunned silence. That night of drunk driving had led us to an experience we would never forget. From that day on, we swore never to drink and drive again.